A lot to talk about. Let's bring in immigration attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. She joins us from Austin. Kate, I have so many questions for you, and there's so many cases we'd like to focus on, but unfortunately we don't have the time, so let me just focus on a few of these cases. Let's begin with Mr. Garcia, Kilmar Garcia. The Supreme Court ruled the Trump administration has to facilitate his return. They say he was mistakenly sent to this mega prison in El Salvador. At this point, there's no indication they're complying with the Supreme Court ruling. What is going to happen now? And does the Justice Department have an obligation under the law to say where this man is? All they're saying right now that he's alive and he's in detention.
It is very concerning. I was initially pleased to see the Supreme Court order requiring the government to facilitate his return, but the decision from the Supreme Court was somewhat vague in that they also said that the government doesn't have to effectuate the return, but they do have to facilitate the return.
What's the difference?
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly the question. And the court was saying that the courts don't step into matters of foreign policy. And the Trump administration issued a press release or a tweet right after saying that this decision from the Supreme Court was actually a win for them, which was, of course, not the way the rest of us were reading it. And meanwhile, Abrego Garcia is not home. I am relieved to hear that he's alive because he was fleeing the very gangs that he was placed in prison with in El Salvador. I mean, he was a victim of gang violence, and he was sent back to this notorious prison. I mean, it is the stuff of nightmares, this prison, when you read about the details of that place. And so that he's alive is good news. And I don't think anyone at this point has real hope or expectation that the Trump administration is going to act swiftly in compliance with the Supreme Court order. And we're going to see more going on at the lower courts regarding this vague language about what it means to facilitate versus effectuate his return.
So at this point, Kate, what are the options before his attorneys?
Well, they're now in the lower courts, and it does seem like the judges are at least on their side. The judges seem to be very strongly issuing orders that he come home, and it will be, I think, interesting to see what happens on Monday with the president of El Salvador coming in. I mean, I think a lot of this is going to be answered for us in the week that comes, but the courts certainly seem to be saying clearly that he needs to be brought home. Whether the Trump administration actually does that or the president of El Salvador is in compliance with that remains to be seen.
All right, so let's move on to another case, a high-profile case. This one is Mahmoud Khalil. He took part in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University last year. He is currently being in a detention facility in Louisiana, and a court basically sided with the Trump administration, saying he can be deported. Now, his lawyers plan to appeal. Is this even legal? Isn't freedom of speech the fundamental right, First Amendment right of the U.S. Constitution? So if these protesters, these activists are protesting pro-Palestinian causes or causes that are not in line with the position of the Trump administration, is it even legal to detain them and then to deport them?
It's such a good question, and I think what we're all realizing is that before January of 2025, we could say things like that. Is it legal? Is it constitutional? And therefore, our expectations is that the government won't take actions that are unconstitutional or that are illegal. And it certainly seems to be a violation of free speech to arrest Mahmoud Khalil, to take him all the way to Louisiana, to find him deportable because he was a leader of protests where he has committed no crimes. And now we see, that he's still detained and that an immigration judge found him deportable. Now, an immigration judge is part of the Department of Justice, and that decision can be appealed, and he might be transferred back to New York where he's from. And so there's a lot going on. There's his immigration court proceeding, and then there's the federal court proceeding over his detention and where he is detained. So this finding of deportability is certainly not the end of the line for his case. But meanwhile, he's been detained in Louisiana all of this time without any criminal conviction. And you're right, this is completely about free speech. This is about him leading protests. And as we're seeing, a lot of other student protesters are having their visas revoked if they've taken part in some of these pro-Palestine protests. And I
Well,
think the thing that takes the Khalil case over the edge is that he had a green card.
right. He did have a green card. That is for sure. And I think a lot of people are also asking, what does this mean for other activists? What does it mean when it comes to, I mean, college campuses are supposed to be a bastion of free speech and activism. Is this creating fear and preventing future protests?
100% yes. This is absolutely having the intended effect, which is to chill free speech. And so people are being very cautious about what they're saying online, on social media. I mean, people are having their visas revoked just because they might have shared a pro-Palestine post on their Facebook page. People are definitely not engaging in protests. And, unfortunately, as an immigration lawyer, as a lawyer, I want to stand up for the constitutional rights of everyone. And as an immigration lawyer, the reality of the situation is that when I'm advising people who are here on temporary visas, it is true that the government, the executive branch of the government has immense authority to just revoke and kick out people who are here on temporary visas. And the current president is doing just that for people who are engaging in pro-Palestine protests.
And just to set the record straight, the administration says Mahmoud Khalil posed a national security concern, have called him a Hamas supporter, but they have not provided a shred of evidence to back that up. Kate, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me on.